Here's Lum, ready to go on first down. He gives to Harmon. Harmon into the right side, and he is inside the 15-yard line down to the 13-yard line with 21 seconds left. 20 seconds. The clock is running here. Harmon on a 3-yard gain to the 13-yard line.
Well, they're probably going to let the clock run down to that 5 or 6 seconds and rely on Houtland's leg. What a way to finish her up.
There it is, 3 seconds, 2, and the crowd is getting a little uneasy, and so am I.
Yeah.
Stop that clock with 2 seconds left. It's going to be spotted at about the 19-yard line. It'll be a 29-yard field goal. The angle will be from the far side, and Rob Howland is simply bent over in meditation. Now he's visualizing. See, he hold his hands up. See him hold his hands up like field goal right through the upright.
I hope that's what we see here, too, in just a couple seconds. And that's the hands up under the goalpost by the referees, calling it good.
Okay, here we go.
What was I thinking about? I wasn't thinking. I was praying to the Lord, as a matter of fact. I'm asking Him for a little strength and direction, and to help me out.
The Iowa-Michigan game, naturally, in 1985 in Iowa City.
The football game of number 1 and number 2. Bo, of course, against Hayden.
Iowa football reached its pinnacle under legendary head coach Hayden Fry in the 1980s and early 90s. Iowa was a unique place in that 3 men, Jim Zabel of WHO, Ron Gonder of WMT, and Bob Brooks of KHAK brought Iowa football and men's basketball to listeners all across the state. As Hawkeye fans celebrated an unprecedented amount of victories on the field, they also celebrated a grand trio of voices which dominated the Iowa airwaves.
That's the thing that helped make Iowa football. Well, they could pick and choose if they didn't like one, or if the game was going bad, why they'd tune to another. It was 365 days of really talking about play-by-play.
Considered perhaps the greatest Hawkeye of all time, Niall Kinnick was one of the last Ironmen of the game. An exceptional passer, runner, kicker, and defender, Kinnick remains Iowa's only Heisman Trophy winner. And a young Bob Brooks was in the stands to see it all.
Well, I saw Niall Kinnick play every home game. I was a member of the Knotholes section at Iowa when Niall and the Ironmen played in 1939, and we were in the throes of greatness. I got into the Knotholes section for 25 cents for the year, and you sat below the Western Union timing clock for the football game, but attendance at the start of the Ironman season was so low that you could hop the little fence and get into the main stands, and as the teams went up and down the field, there was so many seats available you could just follow the action. You were almost involved in it.
Brooks got his broadcasting start at the University of Iowa's WSUI radio on campus, where the lifelong sports fan quickly fell in love with sportscasting.
Nobody in our family tree had ever done anything like this, so I fell out of the tree. I really decided early what I wanted to do. My dad always told me if he was alive today that, well, son, someday, you're going to get a real job. But I never did.
Like Bob Brooks, Jim Zabel grew up in the Hawkeye State. Born in Davenport, Zabel graduated from the University of Iowa in 1944. And in 1946, Zabel began a near 5-decade streak of broadcasting Iowa football, giving Hawk fans his patented, "I love it, I love it, I love it," during the game's biggest moments. Despite their newfound success, these Iowa natives never left the state.
I've enjoyed it in many, many ways, and I felt comfortable here.
Boris Evashevsky's 1956 Hawkeyes tore through the regular season with a 9-1 record and a Big Ten championship. They were rewarded with their first trip ever to the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California.
I really believe the things that stick with you over a period of time are first impressions or the first time you've experienced that. Because I remember telling Jim Zabel the night we got to the first Rose Bowl game and to the Huntington Hotel in Pasadena, I turned to him and I said, "Jim, I never thought in our lifetime we'd be here."
Ron Gonder took a different path to the state of Iowa than his colleagues.
Nothing. I knew, I didn't know anything about Iowa. I didn't know anybody in Iowa at all, no.
Growing up in upstate New York, Ron Gonder began to realize the impact sports had on his life.
I think I was about a junior in high school maybe, and I actually had thought about coaching. I wanted to do something that was close to sports. I thought that you had to be really good in sports to be a coach, which isn't really the case. But so I thought, well, what would be close to that? And that would be sports writing. And then my senior year, I thought, no, maybe sportscasting.
After bouncing around, the Big Shoe found his calling at WMT, where he stayed for the next 31 years.
Iowans are very friendly people, and I found that when you work there, people regard you as family. And so I mean, the transition was very, very easy.
After 2 decades of desolation, Hayden Fry revitalized the Iowa football program, bringing the Hawks back to the Rose Bowl in 1982. By that time, the trio was in its prime.
It was pretty much of a team game. Bump Elliott, the Iowa athletic director, used to call us just the three voices.
It was a lot of fun, and they, you know, they are friends.
Well, it was great camaraderie, and we all had a niche that we guarded, of course, but we became great friends, had a lot of dinners together, had a lot of great experiences together, respected one another, and basically I think it's probably one of the most unique stories in broadcasting.
So we spent a lot of time together in airplanes and over meals and close to one another's families. So it was just a great relationship.
Well, usually in that day of radio or in the earlier days of television, you'd be at each other's throats trying to outdo one another. We never looked at it that way, or at least I didn't, and I don't believe that Ron or Jim did either.
You know, I could never have expected that kind of relationship with other sportscasters. Those two guys are two of my best friends.
It was an upset of top 10 powerhouse Nebraska at Kinnick Stadium in 1981 that jump-started a memorable decade.
It was such a shocker for that team to do that. What it did, though, I mean, then it really set the tone for what was going to take place, what was going to happen.
While the Iowa-Nebraska game was perhaps the biggest upset of the decade, the most shocking play took place 6 years later. Iowa hadn't beaten Ohio State in Columbus since the 1940s. Facing a 4th and 23 under a minute left in the game, a Hawkeye tight end became legend.
Mike had left the booth to get down to the locker room, to make his way to the locker room. And so I was alone.
So 4th and 24. Hartley with Hudson behind him. Here it is. It's all on this play.
And when Marv caught the pass, he was covered up. He tumbled, and I wasn't absolutely sure about who it was.
Hartley drops back to throw, throws to the right side. It is complete to the 5-yard line, down to the goal line, and he's in for the touchdown.
And if Mike had been there, you know, another set of eyes is always great in the booth. Mike might have caught it right away. But luckily, I filled a little bit.
Marv Cook, I believe, we may never find out. There's a huge celebration down there in the end zone, and I think it may have been Marv Cook.
And then with the binoculars, caught his number. But
it was to Marv Cook, a 29-yard touchdown pass, and the Hawks are on top with 6 seconds left. 29-27. Oh, brother.
That's what I remember. I remember struggling with a really, what turned out to be historic moment in Iowa football.
One game stands above the rest from the Hayden Fry era. Number 1 versus number 2. Iowa versus Michigan. Hayden Fry versus Bo Schembechler.
Okay, here we go. Vlasic will hold it. 29-yard field goal try. Spot is down. The kick is up. It's high enough. Fired up. The Hawks win it! Iowa has beaten Michigan! Oh, brother, what a game! What do you think of that, Mike?
Oh, boy, what a... And the team's going crazy out there. They're piling onto each other out in the middle of the field. Let's hope nobody gets hurt in this display, but what a football game we saw here today. The Hawkeyes just kept sawing wood up and down the field and got 4 field goals to Rob Howland. What a victory.
For all 3 Iowa broadcasters, this was a moment that remains a favorite.
The plans you had as a young person maybe were different than the way it turned out. But wow, it turned out so great.
The fan reaction to Ron and Jim and myself has always been heartwarming. I know it was to Jim and to Ron, and certainly to myself, to have people just come out of the crowd and thank you for what you have done. But you have to say, well, the road isn't done yet.
I hope people understand that there is a story everywhere in the archives, a story that merits preservation, a story that merits being memorialized. It's very much in keeping with the mission of the Archives of Iowa Broadcasting to ensure that that story be preserved.
The Archives of Iowa Broadcasting started as a very small collection in the office of former Wartburg professor Grant Price. Grant's dedication to the archives and influence on Iowa broadcasting has led to an expansion of a collection that few others in the country can rival.
Grant realized that it was more than just looking back a week or two, that we had history, and the history of Iowa, and we needed the place to store it. He established as the best he could at that time the file system in just storing the raw footage.
It was and it remains unique in many respects. There are repositories around Iowa that have small collections of broadcast-related holdings, but nothing really to the extent that the Archives of Iowa Broadcasting houses at Wartburg College.
But time is running out on much of the media in the archives. For Iowa's broadcasting history to be preserved, we must act now.
The urgency that we face in the Archives of Iowa Broadcasting is the fact that These are media formats that are at risk of obsolescence. And one day soon, unfortunately, it will be nearly impossible to be able to play back those earlier media formats. If we wait much longer, it will be too late. If we are able to at least prioritize the audiovisual materials that are at greatest risk, we can beat that deadline. And I'm confident that we can.
If we don't start, we'll never make any inroad. How far is it away from being finished? I don't look at the finished product. The finish line is always moving. We need to start that plan, that organization, and further what's already been done. So the inertia is there. Now we need to take that second step, and whatever that second step is, even if it's a baby step, it's progress.
The archive of Iowa broadcasting is a treasure that needs further care, time commitment, and resources.
Get involved. Know what we have in this treasure, first of all.
The Big Three reached a peak in Iowa sports broadcasting that the state had never seen before and may never see again. But as the stories begin to fade, the importance of preserving the past in the archives of Iowa broadcasting continues to grow.
Sports is a portrait of life experiences, and the world of sports is the greatest teacher in that treasure of information.
I think that that's what is rewarding to me, to think that my little bitty contribution is going to go into your archives, and that it will add to what people in the future are going to be able to know, learn about, you know, sports broadcasting in the state of Iowa.
10 days after my passing, they will wonder, well, who was that guy? And let's hope that some people will go back and say that he contributed a little bit to the history of sports in the state of Iowa.
13,689 items make up the archives of Iowa broadcasting. Over 60 years of history from all across the state are represented in the archives of Iowa broadcasting. Footage of popes, presidents, and the people of Iowa are found within these walls. 99% of all media found in the archives are simply waiting for preservation to ensure that Iowa's unique collection of broadcast history may live on forever. Now is the time to learn. Now is the time to act. Now is the time to preserve.
Boy, I think, fellas, as Hayden Fry would say, I think we've milked the old cow dry.